Weezer. 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 Certainly a polarizing band, but an extremely important one in the grand scheme of things. On one hand, they've released some of the greatest pop and rock albums of each decade, starting in the 90s, including Blue Album and Pinkerton in the 90s, Green and Red Album in the 2000s, and Everything Will Be Alright in the end, White Album, and Hurley. Who remembers that album cover? In the 2010s. However, we've also had some of the most controversial, for lack of a better word, albums of our time released by them, including Make Believe, Ratitude, Pacific Daydream, and Black Album, and even Teal Album a little bit. Of course, because of how big the Weezer fandom is, I was still interested in what was going to happen in 2020, in the 2020s. But then album delays started happening from pretty much everyone for obvious reasons. Van Weezer was announced to be released in May of 2020 and was supposed to coincide with a tour alongside Green Day and Fall Out Boy. However, due to the situation we are currently facing, that was delayed as well. The release date was pushed until May of 2021, aka this month, but not until Weezer released a surprise album entitled OK Human in early 2021. I did a mini review of that album in the video linked in the description, so feel free to watch that if you'd like. It was recorded completely analog with very little guitar, with frontman Rivers Cuomo taking over strings and keyboards. However, I knew that there was going to be a new album from Weezer, and that was almost definitely going to sound like the last few albums. I mean, aside from Black Album, probably. And my guess was partly right. It retains that modern rock edge that many of the recent albums, such as White Album, had, and added more modern pop rock and synth pop productions, such as Teal Album. The fact that Weezer has remained relevant in a world of industry plants and shitty labels is certainly huge, and the memes definitely have something to do with that. Rivers Cuomo runs what I believe to be one of the best celebrity TikTok and Twitter accounts. Included on the screen are just a few samples of what I consider to be some of the most legendary tweets ever, whether these be real or fake. This is Rivers at his finest. Though they certainly have released some masterpieces, it is usually agreed on by anyone with the right amount of brains and no student loan debt that Pinkerton and the Blue Album are their finest works. Did Van Weezer take inspiration from these first two albums? Certainly. I think they learned a lot from every album they have put out, good and bad. Weezer finally learned what makes them good in the first place, that being relatability. Look at these guys. Would you believe these guys are worth somewhere around $100 million USD in 2021, according to some source I found on Google called the MD Daily Record? Certainly not if you didn't know they were already rock stars. I would have just assumed they worked at the subway down the street. To start this album off, we have Hero, which was the second single from the album. It received tons of radio airplay across modern rock and pop rock stations, and hit the charts very easily, helped by a great music video and message giving a huge thanks to the frontline workers risking their lives in dire times. I'd like to also take a moment to give a huge thanks to the frontline workers such as nurses, doctors, and people who work in essential businesses such as grocery stores. We couldn't have made it through all of this without you. You rock. Let's get back to Weezer. As a song itself, it goes quite well with many of the recent releases, or even Blue Album era stuff from Weezer. It's overall just a meat and potatoes track with nothing super flashy, keeps the usual things you'd hear in any great power pop track, especially coming from the guys in Weezer, and includes great hooks on both the vocals and guitars. All in all, great song. All the good ones keeps with the theme of great hooks and a swinging bass line. There's a few questionable lyrics on here I found, but that's kind of a given for Weezer albums, and I've just come to acknowledge that for whatever album I'm listening to. The main thing I wasn't huge on was the main hook mix. The synths sort of blare out weird and bury Rivers' vocals, I found. However, it's a great track as well. End of the Game was the first single, and probably my favorite of the singles. Likely my favorite song on the album, too. More power poppy hooks here with great lyrics referencing a Green Album track, the Rolling Stones, and even Narnia. The obvious highlight here has to be the great guitar work between the great chord progression in the verses and chorus, and the tapping solos in the intros and bridge. The guitars on this track and the entire album are, of course, very big into the heroic, epic 80s glam and hard rock sound, and this song is a great example of it. Definitely my favorite on the album. The last single on the album is I Need Some of That, which is probably up there in my top three favorite songs on the album. It's definitely going to be on repeat for a while. The song features some hand clapping percussion, which generally I'm not a huge fan of. I've never really discussed it in length, but I think it does work sometimes for some bands, but sometimes I feel like it can be a bit, tacky or I don't know, just embarrassing. Depending on the band, I don't really like the hand clap percussion, but for some bands it works. I think it worked well for Weezer. I think it worked well for Foo Fighters on their last album. They had a couple songs with the hand clap percussion. I think it worked well with like Fits and the Tantrums, those kind of bands. But with bands like Of Monsters and Men, as much as I love those bands, I don't think it really works for them. And like I've discussed folk rock and indie folk a lot on this channel with Passenger, Monsters and Men, Strumbellas, and all that. But regardless, I'm getting off topic. Hand claps in modern rock and pop music. It's a side of the fence that I'm like in between. Some bands do it well, some bands don't do it well, and that's kind of my take. So yeah, hand clapping percussion works here really well. Nostalgic lyrics about not wanting to grow up, as per usual with Weezer track, and your usual Weezer harmonies in the chorus. This track is also another prime example of the synth work being as good as it is on this entire album, especially the first half. I also quite enjoyed Beginning of the End, with one of those epic 80s harmonized guitar solos. However, I think after this part of the album, the quality and memorability started to go downhill, and that's definitely something that many other critics touched on too. That's just something I'll be touching on, I guess. Blue Dream samples Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne, pretty much a literal copy of it too. Only to give a pretty lackluster track. It's fine. I mean, it's forgettable. It has an okay hook and it has okay singing, but it's not something I would put on again willingly. One More Hit was probably one of the more cringy songs I've heard from Weezer in a while, with that Pump It Up Into Me Daddy line that remind me of that one Dance Gavin Dance lyric from a couple of albums ago. It wasn't a terrible song, however, it's more memorable than Blue Dream for sure. I get the message of the song, but it just really doesn't work in a song that's sounds like this, in my opinion. Sheila Can Do It was another forgettable track here. It really just sounds like they got the local Weezer cover act to cover Buddy Holly for the album. I'll be honest, I really don't remember this one aside from the motorcycle sound effects. However, probably by far the most forgettable song, in my honest opinion, was She Needs Me, which is really just pointless, bland filler that could have probably been on like Blue Album or Green Album as just a filler track, but it does not deserve to be on this album. The last song is Precious Metal Girl, which has some interesting lyrics that are akin to something you'd probably hear on Pinkerton. This is an acoustic ballad that's fine, but it's just some lyrics are kind of stomach churning. It's fine. It's whatever. It's a nice ballad. It's a nice acoustic ballad. Overall, I was pretty happy with the first half of this album. It's great. I was quite let down with that last half, however, as you can tell how long I talked about each track. I'm going to give this album a 6 out of 10. There's certainly good ideas and has some of Weezer's best ideas and songs in years, but also some of their worst moments in years, including the Crazy Train sample. Why, Weezer? Why? Yeah, I mean, I guess you could stick this somewhere around Red or Black album in terms of worst to best ranking. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, please leave a like and maybe a sub. I'll probably be back to face cam videos for the next while. So, yeah, here's my face. Enjoy it while it lasts. Also, new recording space. It's the basement. More reviews and music related stuff to come soon. I have another favorite album of all time video coming out next week. It's gonna be In This Moment related. So I'll see you then. Weezer, Van Weezer, 2021. Peace.